Hello, and welcome to the MMO Report, where everyone is required to wear fishing waders. I'm your host, Casey Schreiner, and this week we've got the inside scoop on World of Warcraft's next expansion, Mists of Pandaria. Morgan Webb went down to the Blizzard offices in Anaheim, California to speak with the people who are working on getting adorable Kung Fu pandas into your video game. So check the weather report, pray to Buddha, and check out what's waiting for you behind the Mist of Pandaria.
I am here with J. Allen Brack, and we are about to learn a little bit more about Mists of Pandaria from him, the production director. What does that mean exactly, sir?
Sort of like the chief project manager, the person who kind of sets schedules, the guy who says, hey, how are we doing on this thing? It's the guy who stands over your shoulder and says, hey, we almost done with that? Can we get finished? Can we move right along? We got a lot more work to do.
You ship games is what you do.
Well, you know, it's a team effort, definitely. There's a lot of people involved, but definitely one of the people who's trying to move things forward.
Okay, so let's talk about sort of the philosophy of this expansion.
Sure. One of the things that we wanted to do that was really different this expansion was really change the tone and everything that has kind of come before. So the last three expansions, we spent a lot of time working about this great evil, this great malevolence, this great presence that is going to eliminate all life or take over the world, very heavy kind of things like this. And we made a very conscious decision to make this one much more about adventure, much more about exploration, much more about, just have a lot lighter of a tone than before. So, you know, we're really excited to be able to do something that's a little bit different totally.
Tell me a little bit about the story that the expansion is going to have.
Well, the story is really about the unveiling of the continent of Pandaria. This continent has been kind of lost in the mists for 10,000 years. It's been very vaguely referenced in other Warcraft lore, and this is finally the chance to reveal that. And, you know, of course, it's a side effect of the cataclysm that we just recently had. And now players are able to encounter it and explore it.
Okay, so imagine I'm a bouncing baby panda. What are some of the adventures I'm going to encounter in the beginning?
Well, if you are a Pandaren character that was created for the first time, what you're going to encounter is the adventure of your life on the Wandering Isle. And the Wandering Isle is the turtle that is out there swimming around out in the ocean that has on its back a Pandaren civilization. And that's actually entirely separate from the continent of Pandaria. So the story you go through there is learning that something has actually gone wrong, something is changing with the turtle, and you're trying to figure out what that is. And eventually you learn that the problem is that a gunship has slammed into the side of the turtle and has wounded it grievously, and you've got to try to figure out how to help the turtle, and eventually that leads to you making a decision about whether or not to join the Alliance or the Horde.
Okay, so, and then we get to the continent,
Right.
and it looks different than it did at BlizzCon. There's actually 2 new areas.
Right, absolutely. What we've done is we've taken some of the areas that had a really cool concept, but we weren't actually going very far with, and kind of starting to realize that, it would be really cool if players had more choice about what zones to adventure in and which ones to skip. It's always been one of the cool things about Warcraft, that I don't feel like we did well enough in Cataclysm from level 80 to 85, was give people opportunities to choose what zones to adventure in. So we took some of those zones that were a little bit underdeveloped and went farther with it and turned them into their own zones. So now we have 7 zones.
What's the spirit of the race? Like, what should players expect when they log on and they start playing level 1?
Sure. So, the spirit of the Pandaren is very much one of adventure. You'll spend your first 10 levels on the turtle kind of figuring out who you are, figuring out the different kind of dynamics between the factions. But at the end, the Pandaren are all about the adventure and the spirit. And the ideology is important, but it's much more about the exploration and the adventure than it is about joining Horde or joining Alliance.
I don't know if the Horde or Alliance are going to necessarily agree with you.
No, they'll take all comers, right?
Okay.
They're interested in swelling their ranks. It's a big land grab for Pandaria, anyway.
There's a lot of new NPCs as well.
Sure. Yeah, we've got a lot of new races that we've introduced. 2 of my favorites are the Mogu. The Mogu used to rule Pandaria for thousands of years, and so we'll see the remnants of their empire as you adventure around. Mogu will be a good villainous race. Another good race that we've done is the Mantid. These are an insect-like race that have actually been contained behind a giant wall, slumbering, waiting for their opportunity to kind of rise up and have their moment. So
don't worry, we'll take care of them.
I'm sure. We'll have all the players mobilized and be ready for them.
So what's the story behind the monk?
So the story behind the monk is that thousands of years ago, the island, the continent of Pandaria, was ruled by one of the creatures known as the Mogu. And they're one of the creatures that you end up discovering and fighting while you're on Pandaria. But 10,000 years ago, this continent was completely ruled by that race. And they were brutal, brutal overlords that enslaved everybody else on the island. And everybody else on the island, as a result of being enslaved, wasn't allowed to have weapons. And so the Pandarian developed this craft of martial arts. Because they weren't allowed to have weapons, so they had to learn how to fight without having really access to weapons. And as a result of that, they developed this tradition of having these monks that knew these martial arts skills. So that's really kind of the way that we've integrated that story into the game world, and that's why it requires the kind of the discovery of the Pandaren and Pandaria for the rest of the world to learn about these martial arts.
One thing I definitely noticed was the art style. It's definitely Asian inspired.
Sure.
It's incredibly beautiful, and I'm not trying to denigrate any other parts of WoW, but
That's wise.
It's inspiring. Like
Thank
I was
you.
definitely surprised by it. What was the inspiration, and,
Sure.
and how many sort of other art styles did you look at?
So one of the early decisions that we made was that we wanted to have a lighter tone and that we wanted it to be about the adventure and the exploration, and then kind of coming along with the idea of, hey, maybe the Pandaren could actually be the race for the players to play. Once you make the decision that you're going to go Pandaren, it really doesn't make sense to go any other way with regard to where your big influences come from. You know, pandas are obviously the symbol of China. They represent a lot to the Chinese people, and having the Pandaren, but have it in some kind of the architecture based on Mayan and Aztec ruins really doesn't really fit together from kind of an art perspective. So,
I would have to have asked you a question about that.
Yeah, it's a little weird to think about that, but maybe that'll be for a future expansion. We'll do Pandaren and the Aztec Mayan combo race.
Now, there have been changes to the monk since BlizzCon as well.
Right, that's right. Pretty much everything that we do undergoes a lot of iteration from the time that we first start working on it until the time it actually gets put in the live game. At BlizzCon, we first introduced them with a resource system that involved both energy and a light force and a dark force. And after playing the monk for quite a while, we kind of came to the realization that it was unnecessary to have both light force and dark force. So we just kind of changed these sort of energy bubbles into what we call ki. And so you now have energy and ki, and you sort of build up your ki using your energy, and then you spend it on certain special abilities.
Now, there's going to be sort of two levels of content in a way. You're going to get one level when you get the box, and then you're going to get different content from the patch.
Sure. Yeah, one of the things that we've done this time, better than really any other expansion, is to map out our content, map out our expansion and patch plans more than ever before. And we've announced that the final boss that we do for Mists of Pandaria is actually going to be a raid on Orgrimmar, where players will actually fight Garrosh, depose him as the war chief, and reinstate Thrall. And so I'm really excited for players to experience that. On the Alliance side, if you play Alliance, I think it's really compelling to take the battle to the heart of your enemy faction's capital. And then if you play a Horde player, I think it's really awesome to do a raid in your home territory. And as well, I think players are really excited to have Thrall back as War Chief. So being instrumental in kind of making that happen, I think, is something that people are going to be really happy with.
I'm kind of excited. Okay, so there's dungeons, I assume, new dungeons for us to play.
There are. We have a large number of new dungeons for players to play through. Along with dungeons that we have also kind of redone, some old school favorites that we redid. Those would be Scarlet Monastery and Skullomance. So that was pretty popular with Cataclysm when we redid the Shadowfang Keep and the Dead Mines, so we decided to do a little bit more of that too.
Okay, so let's talk about, we're going to get serious here for a second,
Uh-oh.
the most important part,
Oh, sure, I'm ready.
pet battles.
Pet battles. That's the most important part?
To be a little bit facetious, but
Okay.
But I think it's fun.
Pet battles are
exciting.
great.
Yeah.
Really excited about the pet battle feature and the what it can be for us. So for a long time we've had pets in the game, and players have asked us, what can we do with these pets? And our answer has been, oh, they follow you around. It's great. And then we introduced a system in Wrath of the Lich King where we allowed players to take on a much larger collection aspect, because they now go into your spell book, and now it doesn't take up as much inventory slots, and there are players that have literally hundreds of pets. The number of pets that you can have in WoW is over 200 at this point. So, kind of looking at that and looking at the various things and looking at, the dream of being able to pull out your pets in some kind of arena-type battle, that was really the inspiration for this system. And so, we're really excited to see it come together and have players start participating.
Let's talk a little bit about the factions, because that works a little bit differently now as well.
Right. With the factions, we've really tried to add a lot more gameplay depth than they've had before. We've always, since day one, had factions in the World of Warcraft, but a lot of times they were viewed negatively as like a repetitive sort of grind, and so we've really tried to refocus that into making them a much more interesting form of gameplay for players. So, for example, we have a faction that we call the Tillers, and they're all about farming and harvesting crops. So you're actually able to take over a little part of the world and grow a farm there and grow crops and set up an orchard and have livestock, stuff like that.
It's instant, so nobody can come into my farm.
It's not instanced, but it is. It's essentially phased, so that when you
Okay.
go there, you see your version of the farm, and
Phased.
when somebody else is looking at it, they see their version of the farm.
That's the word I meant to use.
Yeah,
All right.
high-tech word.
So one of the things that we wanted to do with regard to faction is really take some lessons that we've learned and really evolve the faction experience. In the past, you had your bar that would just kind of move from neutral all the way to exalted, and yay, you're exalted with that faction.
Yay, and you've got a mount.
You did amazing things. Well,
Yes.
that's still there,
Okay.
but we want to increase that experience even more. So with 4.2, we introduced this idea of you actually growing a world tree in the land of the Firelands. And that actually changed over time, and you unlocked different quests, and you helped grow the tree, and things got better as a result of your work. We're going to take that idea with all the factions. So for one of the factions, you'll be helping out the Pandaren farmers, and so you'll help one of your neighbor-friendly Pandaren actually clear out his fields. You'll actually get some pigs. You'll grow his farm over time as part of your faction experience. We also have another faction where you'll actually learn and grow your own flying mount. And so it'll start out as an egg, and you'll have to take care of the egg, and it'll become a pet that will follow you around, and eventually it'll become a mount that you can actually mount and fly around.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you.
The takeaway, pet battles.
Purchase confirmed. Like that was ever in question. Thanks to Morgan for making the trip for us, and thanks to you for watching. I know this episode was severely lacking, well, me, but we'll be back next week with an all-new regular episode. That's g4tv.com/MMO. So until next time, I'm Casey Schreiner. This is the MMO Report, and I know the Hunger Games comes out this weekend, but to be totally honest, I have no idea what that movie is about. Is it like the film version of The Biggest Loser, right? 14 fatties are thrown into an arena and only one walks out alive? Sign me up. Thanks, Hollywood.